skydiving. Hope comes and stops us in our tracks. Bravely we prove in our striving, trudging together each day. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Raw Recovery. It is Tuesday and another time for edition of Raw Recovery with Dion Miller. Today, we have a guest. Her name is Sharon, and again, brought to us by Jill, our promoter. I got to talk with Sharon a little bit before we came on, but I don't like to get them know them too. I don't like to get to know my guests too much, because then it kind of ruins everything for me, because I have a lot of fun discovering and things like that. But so Sharon and I did some talking. She has got an interesting background, but the one thing that kind of caught me that she was very astute about was hitting meetings. 16 years and she's still hitting meetings. Um, that tells us that no matter how long we go, we still need that in our lives. So, Sharon, welcome to the show. Welcome to Raw Recovery. Thank you for taking your time and being on.
You're very welcome, Dion. It's nice to be here. And my name is Sharon, and I am an alcoholic.
Fantastic.
And I say that because I have been able to get 16 years, 10 months of sobriety. My sobriety date is January 17th, 2004.
Okay.
Through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so what I'd kind of like to do, and I'm impressed by my length of sobriety.
Yeah.
And, people who know me today would not recognize me had they met me 16 years ago.
Sure.
I was a completely different person. And, but I owe everything that I have to Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the people in it and God. And I'm sorry, I started to get emotional.
It's all right. That's what we are here for. I will cry with you.
It blows my mind. All these years, it still blows my mind that I have not had to have a drink.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is I've shared my story hundreds of thousands of times, probably, or thousands of times at least in all these years, is that I understand that other people get sober through a lot of different ways.
Sure.
I don't have that experience. What I know from Alcoholics Anonymous is that when you tell your story, it's always what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And so I'd like to kind of keep that because that's what I know.
Okay.
And so again, my name is Sharon. I'm an alcoholic, and
hi, Sharon. Yeah. I can hear thousands of people saying it right now behind me too. Yeah.
Yep. I believe now that I was born an alcoholic, and some people don't think that, and that's just an opinion that I have.
Sure.
There's nothing in our textbook, and the Book of Alcoholics Anonymous is in fact a textbook. And my copy, my first book, Alcoholics Anonymous, is the pages are falling apart. It's been highlighted all over. But I believe that I was born an alcoholic only insofar as I look back through over my life and my childhood. I can clearly see from day one that I never reacted normally,
like other,
or what was considered normal. I never reacted the way that other people reacted. I grew up in a fairly well-off family. My mom's family is from Colorado, and she comes from an absurd amount of money where they had a butler and a maid and a nanny and all that sort of stuff. And my dad is, she's Irish Catholic. My dad is Polish Catholic, and he was in the military. He retired a colonel in the Army. He was a Special Forces Green Beret Army Ranger. That was my dad. So anybody that knows anything about the military, I grew up with a very not a real flexible, very rigid home life with rigid rules and rigid things. And And I was taught that all you had to do was just manage. If you just manage your life, manage your things, you manage your family, you manage your money, everything was about, you know, the straight and narrow. And we traveled. I was never in the same place for more than 2.5 years because my dad was being transferred all the time.
Yep.
Because he was special forces, I never knew what he was doing. So growing up, I couldn't talk about what my dad did because I didn't know.
Yeah.
I couldn't talk about it.
Uh-huh.
But I was always the new kid in every school.
Yeah.
And we were always in some place. I spent all my formidable years from the time I was 11 until I was 17 in Europe.
Okay.
Because my dad was sent to England and then later to Germany.
Okay.
And I think in a lot of ways, that made me much more open-minded than the average person.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because I've seen a lot of things. We've been to a lot of countries, and
you've seen a lot of different culture.
Yes,
you've had to adapt a lot. In order to adapt, then you have to, when in Rome, you do as the Romans do.
So, yeah, when we were in Germany, I learned how to speak German because that's what you did, awesome. But one of the things, and this is sort of a segue into why I bring all this up, is that when we lived in Germany, I went to an American school on the American base in Heidelberg, Germany.
Okay.
But me and the rest of the kids and our whole high school and middle school and high school, all of us went to school together. There was probably maximum of 75 to 100 students.
Okay.
We weren't a big group.
Sure.
But what you did on the weekends for fun is you went off the base, you went out into the regular economy. And in Germany at the time, if you could see over the counter and you had money, you could buy anything.
Yep.
And it didn't matter what it was. And at the time there was lots of different drugs, which I'm an alcoholic. I'll do drugs because they were there, but I like to drink. Yep. And so I started drinking really early. And the very first time I ever drank, I got drunk. I had a blackout, I passed out, and I got up and I thought this was amazing. And because of us moving all the time, I was a very, very shy child. I was short. Okay. I was short, fat, and I had crooked teeth. And for those of you listening, I'm still short, but I'm not fat and I don't have crooked teeth anymore.
You're beautiful, Sharon.
Well, thank you. But I grew up very insecure. Yeah. And the alcohol made me feel wittier, tittier, prettier. There's just no other way. Yeah. I just felt at ease. And our big book, the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, talks about that the ease and comfort that comes with taking that first drink. And I absolutely felt like I fit in. I could speak to people I wouldn't normally speak to. I could not care what others think. And then, of course, I was out of and away from my very rigid family.
Yeah.
I also joke that I'm a recovering Catholic, and I don't say that to be disrespectful to anybody, but
certainly, yeah.
But that brings up another interesting point, that the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual program. And it was very difficult for me, coming from a Catholic background, to understand a God, because the God I grew up with was a punishing God. I was born a sinner. I was going to die a sinner. There was nothing I could ever do to be anything but not good enough. I think all of that sort of helped fuel my drinking.
Okay.
I didn't drink alcoholically to get myself into trouble for many, many years down the road. Okay. But in Germany, the weekends were always the same. You went out with your friends, you went out onto the German academy, you spent your allowance, and you got drunk. And, I got a chance to do things like go to an opium den, because why not? There was this liquid speed called X112, and why not? We had this other downer pills. We called them dogs. And, I was trying to think what they used to be, what their official name was. And Mandrix is the word that comes to my mind, but I can't say. It was just what we did.
Okay.
But when my dad retired from the military, which was after our last trip to Germany, we moved back to the US. And he finished up his tour, his military career at the Leavenworth, Kansas. Used to have a military college. Not only is the Leavenworth prison there, which a lot of people are familiar with.
Yeah.
There was a military college there. And so he spent the last couple of years in service with the U.S. Army teaching there.
Okay.
I came back to the U.S., spent that last year with him in Kansas. I had all the stuff to graduate high school, but the state of Kansas wouldn't allow me to graduate because their rule was that you had to be 17 and 3 months or something. And my birthday isn't until October, so I didn't. It was just an interesting thing. So in all of this time in the military and traveling, I had never in my life run into any kind of bigotry. No racism at all. I mean, if you were an American, that was all that mattered.
Yeah.
And so I was very naive in that. And we get back to Kansas. And here I am, 17 years old. They're forcing me to go to school, even though I had, way too many credits.
Yeah.
And walking to the high school down the street. And this was the first time I'd ever run into racism, and I was just blown away by it.
Okay.
I kept trying to talk to the young woman walking in front of me, and she kept trying to blow me off, and she kept walking faster. And I'm trying to catch up with her to talk with her. And she finally turned around and she said, "Don't you know you can't talk to me?" And I said, "Well, I'm new here. Can you, help me out?"
Mm-hmm.
And so she gave me a few pointers, all the while looking at me strangely. And the first lunch break at school that day, I was jumped in the bathroom by a group of Black ladies who told me that hanging out with a mulatto, a girl who was half Black and half white, was unacceptable. And then that afternoon, coming home from school, I got beat up by a group of white girls because I had tried to cling to this. I'll never forget her name. Her name was Gretchen.
Okay.
And I was just trying to talk to somebody, but that was such a strange thing for me.
I'm sure it was.
And with all this Black Lives Matter, and quite frankly, all lives matter.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just something that I had never run into, and I found it shocking and horrible. And from that moment on, my whole desire was to get the hell out of Kansas.
Yep. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was ugly and awful. My drinking to this point was not that bad. I could go months and months without drinking, but if I got an opportunity to drink, I'm going to get drunk.
Okay.
And I did. I started hanging out with old people that were older than me. And the first real serious boyfriend I had was in Kansas. His name was Michael, and he was 4 years older than me. And I met him when I was out on the weekend partying, and ended up marrying him and moving back to Colorado, where my family was from.
Okay.
And that's when the drinking started to become a lot more prevalent in my life. I always worked. I was able, when we first got back to Colorado, to find a job in brokerage firm as a runner. I ran stock certificates, and my drinking at that point started every weekend. My ex-husband liked to do drugs, so I started doing that every weekend. And the drinking progressively continued to get more and more until I got pregnant with my daughter. I was 24 years old. I didn't drink or use drugs when I was pregnant because I just knew I was pregnant.
All right.
Same thing happened later with my son. I got pregnant and I just woke up one morning, knew I was pregnant and didn't drink or drug.
Good for you.
Probably because it made me ill, but also because for whatever reason, I thought it would probably not be a good idea. But then I divorced this man because he started using meth. And so long story short, I'm now a single mom. And the only thing I did was raise my 2 kids and drink every single day when I got home from work.
All right.
That's all I did. I'd go to work all day and I'd pick my kids up from daycare and I'd get drunk.
Okay.
And I'd get drunk and I'd get drunk. I didn't date or I didn't do anything else. I just took care of my kids, came home from work and got drunk.
Okay.
And this progressed very rapidly until 2001. After 9/11, I got laid off.
All right.
And I had a boatload of money and no job. And that's when I started drinking all day, every day.
All right.
And it was awful. It was awful. It was hideous. It was ugly. I thought I was having fun. I thought this was, our big book talks about our alcoholic life seems the only normal one.
Yeah. Yep.
And because I was, in my mind, saddled with 2 children, and I couldn't go out to bars and do all this fun stuff that other people did, I'd come home from, or after I got laid off, I was now free to run about and do all kinds of things and run amok. And I started doing some bar hopping and leaving my kids, for a night or 2 alone and, meeting guys. I'd never done that and getting into all kinds of trouble. I got a DUI.
Okay.
Back then, they didn't do a lot about it. I got a DWAI.
All right.
They didn't do a lot about it. And then one night driving up to somebody's house in the mountains, while drunk, I crossed the center line on a mountain road, Highway 285.
All right.
And I ran head on into a Volkswagen that had 4 teenagers in it.
Okay.
And 3 of them were seriously injured. And I was charged with felony vehicular assault.
Yeah.
And I have zero recollection of that entire thing. And for the record, I'll say that, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky that nobody died, number one. But I absolutely hate the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction.
Yeah.
It annihilates all things.
Yeah.
And our big book talks about that. So anyway, my parents were gracious enough. They had since moved back to Colorado after my dad retired. And they took both the kids because my ex-husband was who knows where.
Yeah.
In his methamphetamine induced state. And I got sentenced to, at the time, it was the longest prison sentence in Colorado history for vehicular assault.
Whoa.
And I was sentenced initially to 7 years prison. And at the time I was 29 years old. I had no idea that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
It was beyond me. How don't they know who I am? This couldn't have happened to me.
Yeah.
So I got sentenced to prison. Long story short. Everybody stayed away from me. I didn't have any trouble in prison, but if you were under 30 years old, they offered a program that allowed you to do a boot camp. It was a military boot camp, men and women. And if you went to this boot camp and you passed, you graduated, that you could get a sentence reduction from the judge. So I did that. I came with 150 people and 14 of us graduated.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And I got the sentence reduction hearing from the judge and got out of prison in 18 months from a 7-year sentence. I mean, the timing and all that couldn't have been better. Boom, I get sentenced. Boom, I'm in there. And then, 3 weeks later, they're packing us all up and all the paperwork went through for me to do that. That was grueling and horrible. And I understand guys that and gals that join the military. When you go off to boot camp, that's exactly what it was like. But so anyway, my mom has since now disowned me because I'm a horrible, hideous person.
Okay.
But that's it is what it is. Her dad was an abusive alcoholic.
Okay.
I didn't understand alcoholism. When I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had no idea what an alcoholic was.
Okay.
I thought that when it came time for me to want to stop drinking, sometime in 2000, late 2003, mid 2003, I really thought that if I wanted to stop, I could. And what I found was that when I wanted to stop, I couldn't.
Okay.
And there's a wonderful part of the big book, The Doctor's Opinion, that talks about the mental obsession and the phenomenon of craving.
Yep.
And I couldn't understand how I couldn't stop drinking.
Yeah.
I had met a guy, his name was Tony, and he moved in with me. Remember, I had gotten laid off and I had all this money and owned a cute little townhome. And he liked to do cocaine and I like to drink. So if you mix the two, that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
But the thing about all these years of drinking is that you do a lot of crazy, insane things. I was mean and hateful to everyone.
Yeah.
It didn't matter who you were. Complete strangers were terrified of me because I had this aura of hatred and ugliness. It was awful. And in hindsight now, it's because I didn't like myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just had no self-esteem, no anything, nothing good could I find in myself. And the drinking would hide all that for a bit. It would hide it all. The interesting part is that in all these years of drinking, I ended up with 3 DUIs.
Okay.
A DWAI, and I was never once told by any judge that maybe you might have a drinking problem.
Yeah, I'm surprised, actually.
I maybe nowadays they have TV shows about it blows me away that so I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, but I do remember the last night I drank. Tony and I had it worked out perfect that you do so much cocaine, you can drink so much, and it's this perfect spot that you get to.
Yep.
And he had since long passed out, and I couldn't do the right amount of alcohol, and I couldn't do the right amount of coke, and I couldn't come down, but I couldn't get high.
Yeah.
And I was at that place in the big book that talks about the jumping off place where I couldn't imagine my life with alcohol anymore because I hated it, but I couldn't imagine my life without it.
Yeah.
And it's the big book talks about the hideous 4 horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. And I contemplated suicide. Tony had guns, and so I was going to kill myself because I didn't know how to stop the madness. I had tried to stop drinking so many times, and it just, I'd swear I'm not going to drink. And then the next morning I'd get up, and before noon I was drunk again. And I had no idea how that happened, but it's because I didn't know what an alcoholic was.
Yeah.
And
you'd solved a lot of things on willpower alone.
Yeah.
I mean, you were brought up in a home where you took care of your business. You take care of your own business. Don't you be, that's
right.
kind of a military thinking.
It is.
I think I would probably have the same thought process as you, and the fact that nobody's brought it up to you, probably because they didn't want to deal with your anger.
Yeah.
And everybody's scared of you.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. I just couldn't understand when I wanted to stop. I couldn't. which was why I had contemplated suicide. I had written out the letter that I was going to leave about who my, where I wanted my kids to go to. And that last night, I was sitting downstairs in my living room, and I couldn't fall asleep, and I couldn't get drunk, and I couldn't get high. And I was just at this really strange place. And I remember looking up going, oh my God, is this all there is? Meaning, is this all there is to life? I just couldn't imagine this, a more awful life.
Yeah.
And that was the absolute part that you learn about in AA that talks about surrender. I was done. And so nothing spectacular happened when I threw up my arms and I asked. It's just that all of a sudden I was just tired. So I went upstairs and I went to bed. And the next morning when I got up, in the back of my head, it said, look for or find an AA meeting. And I had no idea what that was. Nobody had ever said anything. I didn't know what a 12-step program was. I had no idea. Hell, we'd been living in Europe. I don't even know if they had 12-step programs. I didn't ever watch a lot of TV. So when I got up the next morning, I had slept for probably about 3 hours.
Okay.
And I told Tony, I got on the computer. This was back in the day when you didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
And so I got on the computer and I dialed up the internet, that dial-up internet. And I looked up Alcoholics Anonymous, and I found a women's meeting that started at 9:30 that morning. And all I had to do was just hold off until I could get there. And I told Tony, you watch the kids. I'm going to go to this AA meeting. And the first thing I learned, and I was petrified, by the way.
Sure.
Scared to death.
Yeah.
And angry as hell. And I walked into this room and all these smiling women, and I sat by the door, ready to bolt.
Yep. Quick escape.
Yep. And, I came in thinking I hated God, he hated me, and that was fine. But I'm sure that God was the reason I stayed that day for that meeting.
Absolutely.
And, I don't remember anything that was said. This was a Saturday morning, and I don't remember a freaking word. I just knew that I didn't want my life anymore.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand me.
Anymore.
Nothing. Me.
I get that. Yeah.
I had turned into this horrible, awful, hateful, insane, crazy person. And I wasn't silly enough or brave enough to kill myself, however the case may be. So I went into Alcoholics Anonymous. I remember nothing of that meeting at all. But this was at a club, and there was another meeting at noon and another one at 5:30, and I sat there all day long.
Yep.
And I did nothing else. I just sat there. The next day, I went to a very large Sunday morning meeting, and it's the first time I ever remember anything that was said to me. And this guy was Sharon, and he said, if you want to, what you need to do is do this thing here in Alcoholics Anonymous like you did that thing out there.
Correct.
And the only thing that I know is that if I drank every single day and I never had a sober breath, that means I'm going to have to do this AA stuff pretty hard. And, and I love Alcoholics Anonymous. That the first part of sobriety was absolutely horrible. I was an emotional wreck. Highs and lows like you can't imagine. I was insane. I was angry. I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. I couldn't hold a coffee cup. You could smoke in the rooms at that time. And so I was chain smoking cigarettes the whole time. And all I did was take my kids to school in the morning, and I'd go back and sit in this AA room and I'd pick my kids up from school and I'd feed them, do their homework with them. Tony would watch them, and I'd go back and sit in this AA room.
Wow, cool.
All night. And I'm glad that I wasn't employed. I didn't know it at the time, but I'm grateful that I had an opportunity to do that. If you drank like me 24/7, I understand why there's treatment centers. I do. I was shaken and baking and physically ill, and I probably should not have detoxed on my own. But that's just the way it was. And a woman came up to me about my third day of sobriety and told me that I had such a horrific chip on my shoulder that either I need to do the steps or you're going to die, is what she told me. And her name was Kim.
Okay.
And she ended up being my first sponsor and the only woman that wasn't afraid of me.
Yeah, good for her, man. Good.
Yeah, the only woman that she said, I see myself in you.
Yeah, that's why she wasn't scared of you, because she was looking at herself.
Yep, exactly. Yep. And it was arduous. It was painful. But I saw her every single day at the noon meeting because she owned her own business. And so she could be at the noon meeting. And everyone in that noon meeting, that became my home group. You got to go to meetings where people, where you feel like you fit. I don't fit in a fucking white picket fence meeting. That's not where I fit.
I hear you.
And so God put me in the perfect place. As everybody in that noon meeting that was my home group, they all had double-digit sobriety, just about, all these long timers, and they were ex-Hell's Angels and iron workers and all of these crazy people that were not afraid of me.
Yeah.
And they took really good care of me.
I'm presuming you're talking about Puttin Sober.
No, I'm not actually.
Okay.
No.
Good. That's even cooler.
Yeah, it wasn't Puttin Sober, although that became my second home because I own and ride my own Harley. But this was an oddball group of people. And except for Kim and one other lady, they were all men. They were all old guys. And but they still carried weapons. I saw more than one gun pulled out in a meeting. I saw more than one knife, pulled out. It was just, but I could relate to them. I could relate to them. That's how crazy and insane I was. I wasn't a teetotaler, and I didn't go to fancy parties and drink my wine.
That's right.
My drink of choice is whiskey and water.
Yeah.
But what this gal Kim did for me and these guys is they taught me how to live differently. It was I didn't realize I was insane until I started working through reading this big book. Kim and I sat down and we read out loud every single sentence in here of the first 164 pages. And we did the 12 steps according to what the big book says, how you do them. And it says here that I need a spiritual remedy for a spiritual illness.
Correct.
And I definitely believe that this is it's a hideous, insidious disease, but
absolutely.
I believe that only a spiritual experience will help. I've never seen people truly change like I've seen people in Alcoholics change.
Absolutely.
In Alcoholics Anonymous. It takes the derelicts of human society and people who are incapable of any kind of decent function and makes them into accountable members of society, and nice people. But the first thing Kim and I since I didn't know what an alcoholic was, she told me, because I told her, I said, I shouldn't be here. What the fuck am I doing here? I don't belong here. I'm smarter than all of you all. I have an above average IQ and I shouldn't be here. And so she told me to start with the doctor's opinion in the big book. Yeah. And that explains that that the body of an alcoholic is quite as abnormal in his mind as his mind. It does not satisfy us just to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality. I have an allergy to alcohol.
Yeah.
And that's the best example or definition I've ever heard, is that when you put alcohol in me, mentally and physically, I don't react normally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people are allergic to strawberries. I can eat the hell out of some strawberries. You know, it doesn't bother me. But when you put alcohol, there's something in me that doesn't react the way it does. And like I have two sisters, and my younger sister might be an alcoholic, but my older sister positively isn't. You know, and the doctor's opinion here told me about my disease. It told me about the phenomenon of craving, you know, that when I taste alcohol, I can't, I obsess over it.
Yeah.
And I have to have more and more and more. So, anyway, Kim and I read through the big book, and I did my first set of steps with her. And I was basically taught all these things about living life differently. You know, all the weird sayings on the wall: think, 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 halt, which is hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. I was taught by my first sponsor, Kim, that in the morning when you get up, just ask God to keep you sober. And that was hard for me. I hated God, he hated me. And she said, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
You know, you ask God to keep you sober. And at the end of the day, if you stayed sober, you thank him. And later with time, you know, I get to, it says in this big book that the purpose of this book is to find a power greater than yourself. Yep. And, you know, that's what we went about, was to find that power greater than myself. And I still, there's a very simple thing that I remember all the time is seek God, clean house, help others. And those are the three things that I try to do every single day.
Yep.
I talk to an alcoholic every day. I read something out of the big book or some of the other AA approved literature, and I sponsor gals. And we work through the big book the same way. We start on page 1 and we read through all of it together and answer all the questions. And that's what I still do. I don't hang out with anyone who isn't a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And not because I don't think there isn't good people out there, but because one of the things that I've realized is that I don't think normally. I don't think like other people think. And there's something not right up in my brain. And because of that, I find that if I'm with people who are like me, that have the same disease, that have the same illness, that suffer from the same malady, that they can understand me.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I don't know, but there's been lots of times in my life at work or whatever else that, you know, you say something and people give you that look.
Yeah.
Look like she's what? What's wrong with you? You know, and so I don't find that in Alcoholics Anonymous. What I will say to anyone who's listening is that, you know, you got to ask yourself if you like your life, if you like what you have. I didn't. I hated it. I absolutely hated it, and I don't. You know, since I've been sober, I never lost custody of my kids. I never was homeless. I never went without anything, except for my dignity and self-esteem. But I went back to college at the ripe old age of, ripe old age. And I ended up getting a couple of college degrees, and I own a home, and I have a Harley, and I have a truck that's all paid for. I have a life today that's worth living. But I still continue to work with other alcoholics. I still continue to go to meetings. In all the years I've been sober, seen hundreds of people who don't stay sober.
Mm-hmm.
And if you sit down and you ask them what happened, they don't go to meetings. They quit going to meetings. They don't. Fellowship is really important with alcoholics. We need each other to stay sober.
We do. Absolutely.
We need each other. And I hated that idea, but I can't survive without you.
Yeah.
Every time I go into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I get my cup filled. I get that spiritual cup filled. And you guys talk my language. And in all these years I've been sober, I don't know that I've ever come close to wanting to drink. I've certainly wanted to hit oblivion.
Okay.
I have wanted to disappear. I wanted everything to be different. I just don't want to pick up a drink to do it. See, because I've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body.
Yep.
But what I do know is that I have alcoholism, not alcoholism.
That's correct.
And staying sober doesn't guarantee that I get to stay sober. 16 years, I learned from an old guy, Floyd, that the further away I am from my last drink, the closer I am to my next drink.
Yep.
And I believe that. And I've seen it again and again and again and again. What I can say, the other reason I hate this hideous disease is that my daughter is a heroin addict and my son is an alcoholic. And that's what this disease has done to my family.
Yeah.
My daughter right now is sitting in prison.
I'm sorry.
And my son, he grew up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was 7 when I got sober.
Okay.
And he's been to meetings till he was 16, and then for fun. And then as soon as he found out at 24 that he has a drinking problem, he doesn't want anything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah. Now he's going to avoid certain people because he knows. But when the day comes when he finally makes that decision, you've taught him what to do and where to go. So there's hope. I only say that because I go through it with my kids too.
It's awful to watch.
It is. It's 10 times as worse when you're a parent. And that goes back to, that's why this is a we program though. And that's why we need each other, because I probably would have made a lot of wrong moves with my kids if I wouldn't have had the guidance of my sponsor, my home group.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's it. I need you people. And for many years I didn't like that. I didn't like the idea with my background of having to need anyone. And now it's an asset. It's not a weakness.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. And I don't suffer from the same problems. I don't have to be right all the time. I don't, I don't have to be at the head of the line. And, if I can stay humble and balanced, and being humble is being balanced, right sized.
Yeah.
I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm horrible at.
Yep.
And it's okay as long as I can just remember that, I still ask God every day to keep me sober.
Yeah.
I don't always thank him at night, but I sure remember to ask him every day. Prayer and meditation is a big thing. And I leave for work in the morning, and I would consider myself a successful person today. Very much so.
Absolutely.
When I go to work in the morning, it's dark. I leave my house at 4:45 in the morning. And the world is dark out, and I don't turn on any loud music. I talk to God and listen when I go to work. Prayer is talking, meditation is listening.
Yeah.
I have to listen to God to hear what he wants for me. And, I've had one of the other wonderful things I learned from my first sponsor, Kim, is that, life is still life. And just because I got sober doesn't mean everything gets good.
Correct.
And, my daughter was hit by a car one year, and when I was 7 years sober, and that was pretty painful. This last year at 16 has been really just a horrible year for me.
I'm sorry.
not that I want to drink, but that I've just
Yeah.
had all these circumstances come up.
Sure.
And thank God I have closed mouth friends that I can talk to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have
Yes.
a place to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my dad and I ended up later in life being very close. And when he died, first place I went to is a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yep.
You know, but yeah, you know, I don't know if I don't know. I don't know if that's good or bad, my little story there. I just know that I need Alcoholics Anonymous. I need to sponsor women.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Lord willing, I don't have to drink ever again.
Yeah. You know, yeah, no, that was a great story. I had a great time listening to you. And it was captivating. There wasn't much for me to say because, that I think everything was right on. Thank you very much for being on our show, taking your time, crying a little bit with us. I know sometimes that can be hard. Um, but you already know that somebody else is going to hear that and get some hope out of it.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing this.
Exactly. Hope is the main reason. You know, I was told you
Mhm.
never turn down AA or anyone that asks for something to do with recovery.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so I know that the first meeting I ever went to, I felt the hope. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
that I heard it, but I felt it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important, hope, because there is a better way.
There is a better way. Well, thank you very much for coming on and taking your time. And to all of our listeners, yeah, we do get sober, but what we really go into recovery, what recovery really is about is recovery from selfish things and fear and trauma and 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 I like the way that you put it because it's right out of the big book. But we do recover from insanity.
Yeah.
I'm a recovered alcoholic also,
Yeah.
and I get that. It does not mean that I'm cured of alcoholism,
Yep.
but now I react sanely. I am not the person that I was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't like that person. And I love who I am now. There's a thing that was going on Facebook. I mean, if you talk to your 16-year-old self, what would you say? Well, good luck, dude. Right? Because I like who I am today. I don't want anything to change, good, bad, or indifferent. Nope. I don't regret
Yeah.
any of it. So, yeah, thank you everybody for coming on. Thank you for listening. This is Dion Miller with Raw Recovery. And thank you for being a part of. I love you guys. You know I do. Peace out and have a day.